I wrote about minyan. So to start with, a minyan is a quorum of 10 men who are equally obligated to pray publicly. Women cannot be counted as part of this quorum because they are not obligated to participate in public prayer. Even though it is generally considered to be a rabbinic edict that 10 men and no number of women constitute a minyan, the concept of a minyan was based on a biblical episode involving the 10 male spies. These 10 men brought back an evil report about the land of Israel to the Jews, thereby causing the other men to despair about conquering and settling.
Would you be able to maybe read a little bit slower and louder, because it's very hard to understand you when you're going quick?
Louder and lower?
Slower.
Okay. These 10 men brought back an evil report about the land of Israel to the Jews, thereby causing the other men to despair about conquering and settling the land of Israel. As a result, all of the adult men of that generation died, thereby delaying the Jews' entry into the land of Israel by an additional 39 years. This incident led Moses, or a later leader, and his court of law to realize that male Jews were apparently deficient in their ability to worship God, based on their having acted evilly when they convened as a group. To rectify this, the Jewish leaders wanted men to train themselves to convene as a group only for holy purposes. This would require the same minimal number of men who had previously gathered in order to do evil. In order to guarantee that men would congregate, they were prohibited from saying certain prayers without a group. This might also have been initiated to emphasize men's degradation and lack of perfection. They were no longer individually capable of communicating properly with God. Only by gathering together with the force of a group would they be worthy of having God join them. With respect to women, however, the Jewish leader and his court said, "You never sinned, you never gathered together in a group to do evil. Therefore, we have no reason to decree upon you that you must gather together to do good." No individual woman has anything inherently lacking in her ability to communicate with God without anyone else's assistance. These women did not sin because each one independently decided not to be persuaded by public opinion. They did not have to assemble publicly in order to form a group consensus not to follow the man. They saved themselves by individually deciding to leave the mob and return to their houses. Therefore, the decree that requires men to join a minyan in order to pray never applied to them. Over the course of centuries, the original rationale for this decree was forgotten, and people made up all kinds of reasons as to why women were not obligated to pray publicly. One such rationale is that a woman's obligation is primarily to her home. In actuality, women were never obligated to pray in a minyan. They retained the original status of being allowed to pray alone, as our patriarchs and matriarchs did, when individuals of great stature were able to pray individually to God. The Talmud expresses this concept by saying that all people were originally created from one individual in order to emphasize the importance of each person being a complete world unto himself or herself. A woman possesses such holiness and purity that she does not need a minyan. It is therefore ridiculous for a woman to want to be counted in one. The entire decree was enacted on men because they require 10 males in order to ameliorate their original deficiency. We can really understand how the value of a minyan is not because it makes men visible, ergo important. Its value is that men have an opportunity to create an environment where God promises to hear any member's prayers, regardless of his personal, individual merit. That it is not men's greater importance that allows them and not women to form a minyan is highlighted by the following situation. If a Jew is ever called upon to choose between violating a Jewish law in private or being killed, he or she must violate the law rather than be killed, unless the required act involves idolatry, committing adultery or incest, or murdering another person. On the other hand, if the Jew is given the choice between violating the law publicly or forfeiting his or her life, the Jew must allow him or herself to be killed. Under these circumstances, many authorities consider that either 10 women or 10 men constitute a public group, in whose presence a Jew must give his or her life, rather than transgress any Jewish law. So there are times when 10 women constitute a public group as a representation of the Jewish nation at large. However, they never do this with respect to prayer. If they were not deemed of equal importance with men, they could not represent the Jewish nation at large when the sanctification of God's name was at stake. And that's it.
Thank you. With strength and vigor.
Thank you.
The chaplain side of me wants to say that though the reasons are as you explained, so based on the social standing today, women may or may not feel the same, and they're, I guess, entitled to that feeling if they do want it.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I hear you.
I was thinking about it because in theory, if we are women as a group good enough to pray alone, why can't we be counted? We were good enough in the first place. So I understand women who are trying to go into minyan because they think we can pray privately, we can pray alone, so why we cannot if we are just good enough, if we retain this original status of being, of never transgressing such a big law. But it is what it is.
It is. Most certainly is. Thank you. Sylvia, great. Well researched, interesting topic. Important to discuss.
One of the topics that we were talking about during the whole unit, so I thought that would be a good idea.
Yeah, very appropriate. After the whole Tila unit, yeah, that makes sense. That's a good point. Thank you. Anyone else left over? Okay, so let's continue with the Kashrut unit, and for those delinquents, let's just get it done. It's not overly complicated. Don't make it crazy. Just write up one-page paper on anything that you'd like that interests you. It's important. The pedagogic reason behind it is that I ask all the questions and you give me all the answers. And after you graduate from this class, I'm not going to ask you questions anymore. No one's going to ask you questions anymore. But your learning still has to continue. Your interest still has to continue. And I want you to put research into your own questions. Spend time in it, whatever it might be, and come up with something to present to others that you're passionate or care about or interested about or curious about or bothers you. Who knows what? So I encourage you to do that, to take ownership of your learning. And I look forward to next week for those who are still outstanding, because I think we're going to have our next paper writing class in like June or July. So very soon you'll have 2 in a row to do. Okay, let's jump in to the Kashrut unit. This is a good one. There's a lot here. Who wants to do the first one? I guess we'll start where we always start, with the letter A. Angie and Ben.
Okay, so the first question is, what is the meaning of the term kosher? And what I could come up with, I think the best thing I could come up with is fit to eat, like holy enough or sacred enough for consumption.
Great. What do many non-Jews think the word kosher means?
I just had this today. I just met a non-Jew today who said, oh, it means blessed by a rabbi.
Exactly. That's what many. Now you have to understand why they think that. Because I mean, I don't have to. I mean, maybe I have to tell some of you or some of you, but according to many Christian theologies, holy water and holy oil, which are used during the Christian sacraments, are blessed by a priest, and it is not holy until the priest blesses it. And if it's the same oil, and as soon as the blessing takes place, then it becomes kosher. So that's why the Christian world in which we live in make a corollary jump and say, oh, kosher means blessed by the rabbi, as a corollary to they're blessed by the priest for the oil. But it is not at all the same, as you all know. But that's at least why they think that. Number 2. Ben, you want to keep going?
Sure. What are some of the reasons given, or ones you come up with yourself behind kashrut? So there is some idea that there's like a health reason behind it. I have heard that. But there's also this notion that it enhances separation between Jews and non-Jews. If you're sort of limited in how you can break bread, so to speak, with other people, it creates a little bit more of like a segregation between Jews and non-Jews, which I guess at one point, and maybe even still, was considered important.
Great. Anyone else have others?
Yeah.
And you having feedback on your side.
Yeah.
I hear echo here.
I had I think one or more other ones that I found. There's like this notion of tikkun olam, which is obviously a basic tenet of Judaism. A special diet reminds us of our mission, keeps us together as people to fulfill it. So I guess it kind of is like separating us from the pack, but also, it reminds us of this, kind of gratitude that we should always have for Hashem, and what it means to be Jewish, as it relates to sort of our covenant with Hashem. So it in a way it sort of symbolizes tikkun olam and our mission to help repair the world. That was one of the ones.
And by that you mean that if we have a system of keeping kosher, that means we're going to be conscious about the food that we take, which will make us more God conscious.
Yes. And there was another one, kind of piggybacking on everything that's already been said. From a moral perspective, the way that we water, the way that we separate, we don't allow a mother to be slaughtered with, her young or anything like that, and the humane way to slaughter things allows us to understand, I guess, the humane components of Judaism and sort of how we're supposed to be sensitive to others, Jews and non-Jews alike, which I actually thought that was I like that a lot. I just thought that was a nice, it sort of connects us to that idea. When you look at the way that we keep kosher and how we keep kosher, a lot of it relates to being a decent human being and also being kind and mindful of other, life forms, whether it's animals or human.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have others that you found in your travels?
Mm-hmm. I found 2 reasons. First is actually talking about kosher food is like a call for holiness, since
Is like what?
a call for holiness, to be holy, because most of the laws of kosher, those that are stated explicitly in the Bible, they are put in a certain way, for you are a people consecrated. Oh, okay. For you are a people consecrated to the Lord your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. You shall be holy men to me. Therefore you shall not eat flesh torn by beasts in the field. Very often those bans are put in this way. I'm Lord your God. You should be holy before me. So don't do this, don't do that. It's a call for holiness, to keep this level of ritual purity of yourself. And then the second one, the table upon which food is served, somehow became identified by Jewish traditional thought with the temple altar, because during the times of temple, food, animals included, were brought for sacrifice, and only certain animals could be brought for sacrifice, and at the same time those animals served as atonement for a Jew. So right now, since we don't have temple anymore, our table somehow works as a temple. We can eat only the foods that were permitted before, and everything we do around the table, hands washing, blessings, grace after meals, very much resemble this sacrifice time of the temple.
Thank you. Anyone else have another view on keeping kosher that they found?
Intermarriage.
Intermarriage.
Yes,
Right. Similar to what Ben was saying, how to limit the interaction between Jews and non-Jews.
and that goes especially for red wine, right?
Yes, yes, especially, it's not just red, white too, all wine.
That's wine. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed, that's right, Sonia. Yeah, so a couple of ideas that I had that some have said already, but just to underline them. Judaism certainly values separations. There's a lot of distinctions that Judaism has between pure and impure, between holy and profane, Shabbos during the week. Judaism likes boundaries and distinctions, and kosher, non-kosher fits into that framework as well. And it's an important framework to have, as opposed to spilling into a moral relativism where everything is the same and there's no difference anywhere. Another idea that resonates is similar to what Eitan was saying, how there's there could be an embedded morality. You are what you eat, and we're commanded to only eat animals that are domesticated, that are plant-eating, not carnivores. We're not allowed to eat any carnivores at all, unless they're like fish who eat other fish. But for the most part, it's for the land animals and the flying animal, the birds. They have to be non-carnivores, so that sort of gives a sense of who we are, and the way we kill them is certainly that way. And mixing milk and meat, especially, like if milk is about creating life and sustaining life, and meat is procured upon death, then mixing life and death together, and the life that a mother animal is trying to give with the dead animal would be wrong. And that should bother us. That should to mix what should be a life source with death of the very animal is wrong. It's sort of it makes me very uncomfortable when you give animals to eat dead animals. Like, you know, if they were like to mash up dead animals to give to animals, that feels very wrong to do. It's similar. It strikes me as something that we avoid. Domesticated animals, that is. As an aside, though we haven't really found too much evidence around the health purposes, the health keeping kosher that are healthy, you can certainly, I mean, you can understand why. Like, pigs wallow in their own mud, you know, and they're like pretty gross animals as to the naked eye, you know, to the layman. So it probably makes sense that they were banned if it was for health reasons. But I read somewhere, totally not a religious anything. It was in one of my, like, you know, normal national magazines about something that iron doesn't mix. You don't get the full benefits of iron when you have an overloading amount of calcium. I think that's what I read somewhere. And it dawned upon me, I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. Where do you get calcium? Where do you get iron? Of course you can't mix milk and meat. It was like, they didn't mention anything about kashrut in the magazine, but I was blown away. I don't believe that's why we have kosher laws, so that we get enough iron. But man, that was so cool the other side, the other like revelation that I had that was similar to this moment was reading again in a totally secular magazine. I think it was Time magazine. It was Time magazine did a article on longevity. They do this every year now, actually, and also with the nurse. I have a nurse that gives my CPE, my chaplaincy students, an introduction to cancer. It's Cancer 101. And at this lecture, she tells them that if everything goes right, because the way we live, obviously, is the cells keep multiplying and multiplying. And cancer is when they just multiply beyond repair and the other ones don't die off. So they keep multiplying too much, which is why we don't grow to be as tall as giants, right? Because our cells, the other old cells die off and the new are replaced by the new cells. Anyway, we can forego the biology lesson. That's not my area of expertise. But she said that cells, if you were not to have cancer, not to have any other disease, and cells were to keep multiplying, when would the cells stop multiplying? And this wonderful Catholic lady, not so religious, no concept of Judaism, said, well, and same thing with my Time magazine, said the natural lifespan would be 120 years. All things being equal. I was like, this is it! This is what the Torah says too! It was a beautiful moment. Anyway, similar to the iron and calcium. So I had to share that with you. Okay, let's go forward.
Rabbi, can I
our
ask a question?
Please.
So when I was living in Israel, something that I noticed, I guess at like restaurants, that seemed to be serving, kosher food. At least that's what they said they were doing. In place of like a cheeseburger, they would serve a burger with an egg on it. I was wondering, like, that seems kind of, according to what you were just saying, a little bit wrong in a sense of like, that's like, an egg is an embryo and a burger is meat. And I'm wondering, why would they consider that kosher, or why not? Or is it not kosher? And what's the ruling on that?
So two responses. One, an egg. We don't believe for animals or humans that life begins at conception, or that an egg itself is life.
Okay.
So an egg is not life on its own. So there's nothing wrong in theory with using eggs, and we eat eggs all the time. And eggs don't have a status of being meat or dairy. They're parv. They're neither.
Mm-hmm.
So they can go both ways. Sorry about that ringing. But that ringing reminds me that I should tell you that today is my birthday. My English birthday. Thank you. My Hebrew birthday is the 11th of Iyar, so that's not going to take place until I think next week or so. But in my house, what we do actually is we have ice cream for breakfast for our birthdays. For anybody's birthday who in our family who lives in the house. Right, like we're not celebrating like my uncle's birthday or something, with ice cream for breakfast. They have to live in the house, and we get to celebrate both our Hebrew and our English birthday. So the kids love this. I highly recommend it. You get to have 2 celebrations with the kids, just a scoop of ice cream, and then they get to pay attention to their Hebrew birthday. And they care about the Hebrew calendar because they get ice cream when it's someone's Hebrew birthday too. It's a good ploy to get them excited. That works educationally as well. Happens to be this morning, we all totally forgot it was my birthday. My kids were on the bus. No one remembered until I was about to leave for work. I was like, wait a second, it's my birthday today.
More ice cream for you.
More ice cream. Well, we decided to do ice cream for dinner instead. And it was dessert after our dinner tonight. I was distracted. So first of all, it isn't an egg. It isn't life. And the second, by the way, that doesn't mean that Orthodox Judaism is pro-choice. We'll talk about this another time. But just because an egg isn't a life doesn't necessarily mean that it has no rights. Judaism believes that the fetus has rights, even if it's not a life. So it's I think a brilliant line to walk, personally. But we'll save that for the unit where we talk about abortion. And the second reason is is that some of the Torah never gives a reason for keeping kashrut. So if you want to say, and this is an important distinction, if one reason for keeping kosher is that it's more ethical, right? For centuries, the most ethical way to kill an animal would be to slit its throat, slicing the trachea and the esophagus. That would shut off oxygen to the brain, and it would die very quickly. And it was the most painless way of killing an animal. If you want to tell me that today we've discovered a new way to kill an animal that is more humane, that is more pain-free, then we should switch over to that, I tell you no. It is forbidden. Because we're not doing the mitzvot because of the reasons. We don't know necessarily the reasons why we do them. We're attributing reasons after the fact. We find meaning in them. And if they don't apply, that doesn't necessarily mean the mitzvah doesn't apply either. So if, let's say, if you find this argument compelling about life coming from milk and death coming from meat, and we shouldn't be mixing meat and milk together because that would be mixing life and death, and all of a sudden we find another argument that strikes a hole in that, or that for some reason it doesn't mean kashrut falls away. So it would mean the reason would fall away, but not kashrut. So your challenge wouldn't make it not kosher, or it would just mean the reason isn't a valid reason. Is that a clear distinction? Great.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Good. I like pausing, long pauses, in case anyone has a question and shouldn't feel embarrassed to ask.
Okay, I have a question. I just
See, I knew it! I knew it!
Okay. In the Bible, it is said clearly that we cannot boil the kid in its mother's milk. But it's talking about mammals only, not about birds, like chicken. And from what I know, the ban on cooking birds with milk was stated later on time. And the reason behind it was that some rabbis got, let's say, careful about the fact that Jews may make a mistake with this or that kind of meat. And that's the reason it's better to forbid it altogether, because that's just safer. So I was always wondering, from what I know, it says that we should not, let's say, take anything from the Torah, but we also should not add anything to the Torah. And this is like an added restriction. That's first thing. And secondly, when you were talking about this, don't mix life with death. Okay, so we are not mixing mammals and we are not mixing birds, but we don't bother with fish, and it's also life. So fish can be cooked or served with dairy products, and it's also life. Two questions at once.
Indeed, great questions. Great questions. And you can even ask it further, because besides for just fish, the Torah permitted chicken with milk.
Yeah.
Right. So forgetting even though the rabbis forbade it, and we're not allowed to eat it, no chicken parmesan ever. That's it. If you've ever enjoyed it, it's gone. Until maybe the times of the Messiah, if that rule is ever revoked, but I doubt it, because besides for the fact that nothing will be revoked in times of Messiah, but besides for even that, it's actually, I think it makes sense. It was a good precaution. So the two questions. The one question is, how do we add any laws if the Torah prohibits us from adding laws, right? So we have to understand what it means that Torah is prohibiting us from adding laws. It's not because it also authorizes the rabbis to make safeguards for the Torah. So how do we solve this contradiction? The rabbis are allowed to make safeguards, but we can't add laws. Well, one way of answering that question, there are many, but one way of answering that question is one is not allowed to make a law and elevate it to a biblical prohibition. It has to be very clear that this is a rabbinic ordinance and not a biblical divine prohibition. So yes, we're not allowed to eat chicken with milk, but that isn't because God said so. It's because the rabbi said so as a precaution to not eat red meat with milk, and does it make a practical difference in my life? No. It makes no practical difference. I have to eat both for sure. The only cases in which it might make a practical difference is if there's a case of doubt. Maybe, I don't know if this is the case. I don't know if that's the case. So I could be more lenient with a rabbinic prohibition than I can with a biblical prohibition. In cases of doubt, when it comes to biblical law, we are strict. Cases of doubt, when it comes to rabbinic law, we are lenient. So as long as the rabbis aren't making laws and claiming them to be of biblical origin or elevating them to biblical status, it isn't a problem because they're given the authority, the ancient rabbis are given the authority to make such ordinances, such fences around the Torah, and especially good ones. I have to tell you, chicken with milk is a very good ordinance, even if we don't like it necessarily. Many people think of meat. Well, if you say I'm having a meat meal, you come to the shul for a meat meal, we might serve chicken and not think anything of it, and not feel no need to apologize or to clarify. You know, meat restaurants, they don't just serve meat; they serve chicken, and that's totally understandable. People use them interchangeably. When you're a vegetarian, you avoid meat and milk, and meat and both kinds of meat and chicken. So and we even have a different word to talk about. We talk about beef, or talk about red meat. But if you just say meat, like most people would assume you're talking about any kind of living creature that walks on the ground. Now, with regards to fish, so fish certainly have a different category. They're not seen in the same way. I mean, they're not mammals. They don't nurse their young with milk. They're different in that way.
Well,
same thing with the chickens. They don't actually. It's not. It isn't the same in terms of, you know, the life force of the mother is being used to now mix with the death of its kind. That doesn't apply to fish. It doesn't apply to birds on a technical way.
What I was thinking about is the fact that fish doesn't have to be slaughtered in a ritual way. So shechita doesn't apply to fish. So maybe it's like don't mix milk with animals that have to be slaughtered in a ritual way, but fish doesn't have to be. So it's like a little bit broader category, I think.
Yeah. But why does shechita make it? So the challenge to your answer would be why does shechita, why does the ritual slaughter have any impact on the reason behind this kosher law? Like, what difference does ritual slaughter make that impacts this reason?
I mean, it's not that I think it makes it has any impact. It's just the fact that technically in the Bible we are not supposed to mix meat from mammals and milk. Then birds were added. Mammals and birds belong to the group of animals that have to be slaughtered ritually. Fish don't. So somehow they stand out of the group anyway, because they don't have to be slaughtered in a specific way. They don't belong to this group of animals that had those characteristics that made them
that's true. Yep. Yeah,
they just don't belong to this group at all.
The question is, why is that? The question is then, why is that? Why is that they so separate? Yeah. Now, some Sephardim actually don't eat fish with milk. There are some Sephardi Jews who don't. But all Ashkenazim do. And even some Sephardim do. But take pleasure, my Ashkenazi brethren. You can have fish with milk.
Is there any group that eats chicken with dairy products or not?
What? Nobody. No, it's absolutely forbidden. Absolutely forbidden. Nope.
So Yoko was asking about eating chicken and egg together.
Chicken and egg, in theory, it's permitted. It's allowed, because egg isn't a life, as we were saying earlier. So I mean, you know, this is just to maintain this reason, but we don't know if that's the real reason for keeping kosher. It's just what is meaningful to me and to others. It's important to keep saying that, even if I'm trying to fit it in. But yes, you can have an egg, because an egg is parv.
you can eat it with the mother of the egg. Assume that the hen was the mother of the egg.
Well, you have. Well, they're actually. You do run into a law in which you have to shoo away the mother bird to take the egg.
Yeah.
So, yeah, probably not the exact mother, unless you catch her later.
Yeah.
Shall we go forward? We don't usually have an opportunity to spend so much time on some of the philosophical reasons. Usually we're bogged down in the halachic realm. So it's nice to take a travel that way. Number 3, Damien and Limor, that's you guys.
I've been getting some easy ones. So, which signs do kosher fish display? And I think it's scales and fins.
Mm-hmm. It is. Limor?
Which signs do kosher mammals display? They walk on 4 legs, they chew their cud, and they have cloven hooves.
Yes, or we call them in the as growing up split hooves.
Yes.
But same thing. So I asked a question about which of the animals that are not split hooves, or because there are 4 the Torah lists. I don't know if I do that.
That they chew their cud or that they're not?
So
You
they
asked
have
the question.
one sign but not the other. Does anyone remember which animals they are?
That question's later down.
Oh, that is. Okay, good, good. So Dan and Shayna, you're up next.
All right, so number 5, are we allowed to eat insects? No, although honey is kosher, which comes from a bee. This is because the enzyme is emitted from the bee into the pollen, thus beginning a chemical reaction. The reaction does not occur within the bee, so that's why honey's kosher, but bees are not.
Yes, and technically though, there are certain insects, like certain species of locust, are permitted to be eaten are kosher. However, besides for it being a little on the gross side, well, I'm told chocolate-covered locust is not so bad. That I've heard this before, to be honest. But anyway, be that as it may, I actually got a question once from a cousin of mine asking me if she could eat a certain kind of locust because it was sort of the new fad. Yeah, what can I tell you? But yeah, eating insects are not kosher, and we don't eat.
Harvard?
We can't really find the kind of locust that might be kosher, so we don't eat any insect, and we're very careful about that, which is going to be the next question.
Rabbi?
Shayna? Oh, yes, Sonia?
Would locusts be parva?
Yeah, yes, bugs would be parv. The kosher bugs that you're allowed to eat would be parv.
Because I have seen locust flour in a granola bar.
Locust flour what is locust flour?
Well, ground up locust. I don't know. It's high in protein.
No, locust flour probably is a flour. If it's locust flour.
Well, ground locust in a granola bar. I've seen it.
Oh, you mean Flour, not Flower.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Locust flour. I never heard of this before. Okay. High quality locust flour protein powder in foil pouches. Our premium locusts are raised on farms. They are fed various types of grasses and other vegetables and raised in clean, hygienic conditions. They are cleaned, processed, and packed in our FDA-approved factory. We make cookies out of bugs to our coworkers. Yeah, this is real stuff. That is not kosher. Not kosher. I didn't even know that existed. Okay.
Wait, why is it not kosher?
Because it's from a bug.
But you said certain species of locusts.
So I don't know which species this one is.
So essentially,
Maybe it could be your business.
That's a good business. Kosher
Right,
locust
kosher locust
flour.
Well, there's a lot of controversy about if it's possible to know, or if the tradition has been lost, which kind of locust it was.
Can I ask a question, Rabbi? Is there any other example that you know of in Kashrut where the kosher status depends on the species? Like cows are kosher, they're not kosher. All kinds of cows. There are many species. Like, is there anything else that's parallel to that?
It's a good question. Well, I would ask you, the certain kinds of birds are kosher.
Right,
but not other birds. So one species of bird is kosher, another species of bird is not kosher. Is that similar to one species of locust is kosher versus another species of locust is not kosher?
Well, I don't know. I would need to like check on it technically, but I think like when you frame it that way, like locust is a species. There is only one species that's called a locust, right? Mm-hmm. Like all different types of cows are still the same species. It's like a cultivar, you know.
What's that? What was that line? Genus, family, come on, guys, we can do this.
Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species.
Boom! Boom! That was great. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. It's a good question. I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of, based on that kingdom, phylum, stuff.
Class, order.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a distinction between species. Yeah, it's a good question.
I think it would be pretty surprising if all locusts were of the same species. There's just so much diversity in the insect world.
Oh, okay, nice.
But I could be wrong. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, because I read that the locust has to have very specific like traits to it, so I'm kind of assuming there's more than one species then too.
Does that answer your question, Ben? Fascinating.
Not totally, but food for thought. No problem.
Well, maybe a paper to be written on this.
If only.
Well, while we're still on the bug topic, what about for survival?
For survival, great question. Well, someone answer that question for me. Sylvia sort of broached it today.
Life above all else, right?
What?
Life above all else. That's what Jackie just said.
With the exception of 3.
Yeah.
Oh, like denouncing Hashem.
Well, idolatry, but yeah.
Idolatry, yeah.
Adultery.
Adultery.
Well, not just adultery, any kind of sexual offense.
And murder.
And murder. The big 3. Those are the big 3.
Murder.
So if you're stranded on an island.
What?
If you're stranded on an island.
If you're stranded on an island, then yeah, you gotta eat, and that means eating non-kosher food. And that's allowed. Yeah, there are a bunch of Holocaust memoirs or stories, and that I was just reading one a few weeks ago, that on Pesach in one of the camps, they couldn't get matzah, so they had as best as they could a seder, and for the matzah section of the seder they used bread because that's all they had. And that's what they used for they tried to create a seder using bread in place of matzah. So certainly.
I read the story as well, and the prayer they gave, the prayer leader, besides the regular prayers for seder, he gave the prayer, this time we are eating bread so that the next seder we can eat matzah. We can eat the proper food.
Yeah, I think that's the same stories that I remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, number 6. Is Shayna with you, Dan?
I just do one of the letters.
Yes.
Okay, so romaine lettuce. Basically,
we get to see you, Shayna. You're like this mysterious woman that no one gets to see. Oh, there we go.
I'm special. You just have to wash it as best as you can so that all the bugs can come off. And you should check it to make sure that you're not eating bugs.
And how do you check it?
With your eyes.
With your eyes. So I like to hold it up to a light. Like just hold up the piece of lettuce to the light. You will be surprised. People scoff at this. There are bugs in romaine lettuce, lots of them. It's rare that I can go through an entire head of romaine lettuce and not find a bug. They are in there. Either they are black or gray or green. The green ones, those are the tricky ones because they blend right into the lettuce. But they're there, and you can see them. They're sometimes a little fuzzy. They have like 6 legs. They're definitely, or 8 legs. They're definitely in there, and it's gross. And you should get rid of it. And forbidden, which is why we're talking about it. Okay, next one.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry, question?
Sorry. In my research, I found like a whole fill a bowl, let it soak for 5 minutes, remove the lettuce, soak again. So it would be sufficient just to hold up the lettuce to the light
After you wash it.
after washing.
You can rinse it, yeah, or one way or the other works.
Yeah, I saw that too, where all of these things had very specific instructions, like mix with vegetable wash, agitate this amount of time, soak for a half minute or a minute, and then inspect. So I was kind of confused of, can you just do the, rinse them and then look, or do you actually have to go through all of the steps?
That's one of the reasons. One of the reasons why we do this together is for this exact reason. So yeah, all you have to do for romaine lettuce is you have to look at it with your eyes in the light, in the way that you can see clearly. Yeah. So yeah, and then you can. It's a good idea to rinse anyway, but you probably don't even have to rinse it if you're looking carefully with your eyes. Then you'd be eating non-washed lettuce, but that's neither here nor there. That's the next question.
The method that I met one time was to take every single leaf and put it in a bowl full of water for some time,
Yeah,
so that the insects will float.
You all must be reading from the same source.
It's really
That's shorter, I think. You put it and you forget about it, and then after some time, when the insects are supposed to be floating on the surface of water, you just take it and look under the light. But it's shorter, I think, that way.
So this is another way. Another way to do it is the way that I'm suggesting, and you don't have to feel forced that you have to do it in this. For romaine lettuce, we're going to get to other things in which you will do it similar to what you've read, but not for romaine lettuce. Eitan and Jackie?
So for bagged lettuce, I assume that it's very similar to romaine. I mean, bagged lettuce sometimes is pre-washed, but probably not to be trusted. So you should wash it again. Maybe inspect all the leaves close to a light or a magnifying glass.
So you never need a magnifying glass, because if you can't see it with your naked eye, then it's not a problem. Right, we're not. There's a religious group. I think they're called the Jains. They're concentrated mainly in India, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So they don't eat any bugs at all under any circumstances, and therefore I think walk around with a mask over that.
Yeah,
so,
and they actually brush in front of them as they walk so that they don't step on any bugs either.
No, that's Marbai. So we are not Jains at all, and we can eat anything that we can't see. If you can't see it, then it's not a problem, and you don't need a magnifying glass to look for it. So you look with your eyes, you look in the light. If you can't see a bug, it's not a problem. But with bagged lettuce, though, just pre-washed lettuce, so you don't have to go to the extreme that you're mentioning, Eitan, because the assumption is that if you check 3 servings worth in a bag of pre-washed lettuce, and there are no bugs in those servings, then you can assume the rest of the bag of pre-washed lettuce is also bug-free. So all you have to do is check 3 servings worth of lettuce, and then you can go free with a bagged lettuce, pre-washed. You don't have to check every single leaf. That would be really annoying.
Yeah. Leek? So do an internal and external check with your eyes for infestation, and check in the tube and like between the leaves for holes, because that could be a sign of infestation. And look for bugs.
If you've used leek in the past, they're almost always very dirty. So I don't know why anyone wouldn't do it anyway, to slice through and check every single layer, but that's what we do anyway. Just with your eyes, nothing fancy, just water and rinsing, and as if you clean the dirt, so just you clean the bugs too.
Well, there's no more money anymore then.
Okay, D.
You don't have to go to this.
Greg.
Carrots, if they're raw carrots, they just require a general inspection to rule out and washing, because we can see them.
Yep.
And to answer your other question, there are 10 to 11,000 species of locusts.
Snap! How do you like that, Ben?
I mean, it's a great question. I'm just glad that we forgot the specific species of locusts that we can eat, but we didn't remember anything about quinoa.
Oh. Wouldn't it have been nice to have both?
Yeah, sure.
Is Carrie with you, or are you alone tonight?
I'm alone tonight. Carrie's at the office.
Okay. Marvi?
Okay, so strawberries, this might be another one that I looked at the more hardcore way. So the one that I saw was
this one you're probably on target for.
Okay, so this one I saw that you need to cut off the tops of the strawberries, rinse the strawberries, and then use the water and like veggie wash or whatever, and soak them and agitate them, let them soak for at least a minute, then rinse off each berry and check to make sure that you don't see anything.
That's actually similar to what we do. So we use some kind of either vinegar or some kind of vegetable wash. You cut off the tops, you put them in there, and then you just hold them under hard flowing water. You know, the full blast of the water, and then they're good to go, assuming you don't see any bugs. And Rebecca is adding in that it also gets rid of pesticides. So double bonus for those who don't eat organic. Sonia.
Do we have raspberries?
Raspberries are coming up, but first we have parsley.
Okay. Well, I think that definitely has to get soaked in water. No matter whether you're, ultra-Orthodox or modern Orthodox, I think you should soak it for 5 minutes and in vinegar or salt water or vegetable wash.
Yeah, so what we can do is, parsley in theory you could check with your eyes, but it's a real pain in the neck to do that. So you don't want to check that with your eyes. So we put them in water, we agitate them. If you see any bugs floating to the top, and you do that I think 3 times, and you do it a couple times to make sure there's no bugs, and then if there are no bugs, then they're good to go. Sylvia. Oh, no Sylvia. No Sylvia. We will return next week for more classes. I wanted to give this an opportunity for anyone who wanted to make an announcement to the group, to ask for prayers or blessings, if that was of interest.
That's nice.
I'm going to take us off of live.